I'd just like to introduce now our next speaker, Dr. Susan Neuhaus, who is actually, I started working with in 2015 as chair of the Road Home, and has done an amazing job of advocating for the wonderful research centre that we have co-located with our Jamie Larkham Hospital. And it was one of the first research centres to actually be co-located with an acute mental health hospital to try and strive for excellence and learning within a hospital environment. Colonel Ret'd Susan Neuhaus CSC works as a consultant surgeon in private practice and holds an appointment as a clinical associate professor of surgery at the University of Adelaide. Susan has also completed a career spanning 20 years in both the regular Army and Army Reserve.
It's lovely to be here, and I'm delighted to be able to participate in this important initiative. As you've heard, this session is titled Lived Experiences, so I do need to start with some disclaimers. I have been both a participant in war and also an observer of its effects. I've treated those wearing our uniform and those that have tried to harm us. But I have come to you as someone who is not an expert in any aspect of mental health or PTS. I did do a psychiatric term back in my undergraduate medical training many decades ago, and I can possibly find my way through the DSM-3. But I have no expertise in understanding the workings of the human mind, although perhaps some insight into the body that houses it. Neither have I ever attempted to access our mental health care system, although I've helped others to navigate its mazes, both inside and outside of the ADF, and I'm not unaware of the barriers and the stigma that involves. So today, I speak to you through a different lens, from my experience as a surgeon and as a scientist, and to set the scene and provide some perspective on the themes of this meeting: research evidence and collaboration. In my own world of surgery, war has been one of the most consistent drivers of discovery and technological advancement throughout human history. From our understanding of battlefield mortality in the Crimean War, through to the incredible advances that are taking place in robotic limbs as a result and a consequence of the contemporary service and operations today. At first, it seems hard to reconcile the chaos of war with the discipline, the standardisation, and the reproducibility that is demanded by science. And yet, as Florence Nightingale demonstrated, it is possible to generate evidence from the battlefield. It was not Florence Nightingale's impassioned pleas as a woman that saw the brutal conditions of the Crimea improve. It was her role as a statistician that enabled her to conclusively demonstrate that most soldiers did not die on the battlefield from wounds. They died from diseases that were preventable with good hygiene and sanitation measures. And perhaps more accurately described as the Lady of the Ledger rather than the Lady of the Lamp, she understood that it was cold, unemotional numbers, tables and spreadsheets, including her early charts, one of which is on the screen behind me, which was a precursor to the pie chart that we all know and love today. It was these charts that were persuasive and irrefutable and held the power to change policy. Of course, being here in South Australia, it would be remiss not to mention another great medical advance that took place perhaps only because of war. It may have been Alexander Fleming who discovered the antibacterial properties of penicillin, but it was Howard Florey, a graduate of Adelaide Medical School, who bequeathed it to the world. And that story contains a sentinel tale of the importance of research collaboration, because the challenge for penicillin was not in proving its efficacy, but in providing a means of manufacture. Had there not been a war, had they not been forced to move their research team to America and to collaborate with US teams of industrial chemists, the impetus to large-scale production may never have been enough to overcome the challenges the team faced. And another important collaborator in providing the battlefield efficacy of penicillin was yet another South Australian, Hugh Cairns, born just 300 kilometres to our north in the mining town of Port Pirie, and also a graduate of Adelaide Medical School. Hugh Cairns was, like Florey, a Rhodes Scholar. He was also a neurosurgeon, and he supervised the early battlefield trials of penicillin, reconstituting it from the urine of patients and re-injecting it directly into their spinal cords. But Cairns' greatest wartime contribution came during his time at Bovington Military Hospital in Cambridge. On Monday, the 13th of May, 1935, T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, lost control of his motorbike. Cairns operated on Lawrence, but he died some 5 days later. His death profoundly affected Cairns, so much so that he took and obtained his brain for autopsy. And perhaps it was this heightened awareness of head injuries that enabled him to take note of the unnecessarily high loss of life amongst army dispatch riders. And indeed, over 2,000 motorcyclists and pillion drivers in the army had died in the first 21 months of the war alone. But it was his scientific approach to addressing this observation that led to his work with a physicist called Holborn. And together, they meticulously analysed road accident data to develop, trial, and introduce motorcycle helmets. And one of the earliest vellum designs is on the screen behind. And these designs have probably done more than any other intervention to decrease the tragedy of trauma on our roads, both in the military and in civilian life. This was a classic example of investigator-led research, of recognising a problem and seeking a solution. I am a great believer in investigator-led initiated research because we need not just good research, we need relevant research. Research that answers the questions and concerns of the day and has meaning for the populations we look after. And this is very much how the Mothers Study, or more accurately, the health impacts of maternal deployment to an area of operations study, came to be. My, albeit brief time in Afghanistan was perhaps the first time that I had really considered the implications of gender within a deployed ADF environment, both from the perspective of what it said about us as a nation and the opportunities that we gave to women, but also about the health impacts of service on women's bodies and on the effects of that on their families. In the course of the last century, the experience of Australian women in war has been a silent one. And there has been silence in our understanding of the unique physical and emotional impacts of service on them as women. As a nation that is seeking to expand women's roles, and indeed now women in the Australian ADF have all roles open to them, it is important that we understand not just our workforce, but also the health impacts on our workforce. And I was concerned because when I came back from Afghanistan in 2010, there was a body of literature which suggested that, simply because of my gender, I was going to be at higher risk of developing alcoholism and a mental health disorder. And I found that alarming. I went to Professor Sandy McFarlane, who many of you will know, and we constructed a pilot study. Following this, DVA and Defence came on board, and what we have now, thanks to Drs. Ellie Lawrence-Wood and Miranda van Hoof, is a landmark piece of research. Perhaps not surprisingly, the outcomes were reassuring, and it meant I probably didn't have to give up my well-loved South Australian glass of Ret'd just yet, and I didn't have to book in for prophylactic mental health care sessions. But the study did so much more than simply provide reassurance, because what it did was to open up a conversation about the different roles that mothers and fathers have within ADF families. Not that one is better or more virtuous than the other, just an acknowledgement that they are different. There are roles within a family that each of us can outsource, and there are roles that we cannot. It also contributed to a conversation about how we consider our own national populations and the unique cohorts within them. Whilst we have access to fabulous research outputs from our significantly more populous allied partners, we are not the same. And it is important for us to understand that we cannot just extrapolate from a North American population or even a UK population, because our cohorts are inherently different. The demographic of our deployed women in particular, the roles and duration of their deployments, the support structures, and our healthcare models are different. And this will lead to different outcomes, especially in areas where there are strong qualitative rather than quantitative impacts. And it opened up new collaborative pathways and ways to expand the focus on families, which has been very powerful. And you will have the opportunity to explore this further through the week. It is important that we continue to investigate the issues that are of contemporary concern and contemporary relevance. Because, as Florence Nightingale and Hugh Cairns showed, even to know if we have a problem, we need accurate data. And we need to test it objectively, not only to challenge prevailing paradigms, but to drive the policy changes that are needed, whether that be to modify practice, to implement measures that will prevent harm, or to treat those who have been harmed. Early next year, the findings of the much-awaited Vietnam Medical Legacies Project, undertaken by Professor Peter Yule, will be published. I, like many, will be interested to read of the lessons, but my perhaps simplistic view would be that if we as a nation had understood the risks that we subjected that cohort to and that were unique to that theatre of war, if we had been able to articulate those risks clearly and been open with those who are genuinely concerned about their health and the health impacts of their service, that cohort may have had a better outcome. And if we had had in place good environmental monitoring, good science, robust longitudinal tracking, we might just have picked up earlier the impact that it had on their families and the generation that followed. We cannot risk again burdening an already traumatised population with a secondary trauma that is created by fear, by lack of trust, by lack of transparency, or by lack of knowledge. But whilst it is important that we contextualise and understand our own national risks, as we work increasingly in multinational alliance frameworks and globally connected information systems, we need to use these resources to solve our problems together. Some of the most powerful research findings to come out of operations in the Middle East have been on the back of the US Joint Theatre Trauma Registry, a registry that tracks every intervention from the point of wounding through to rehabilitation. And it's provided practice-changing insights from everything from the way we resuscitate burns victims to the temperature in our operating theatres. Australia has a unique healthcare environment where every healthcare intervention can, in theory, be tracked using discrete codes. Whilst we understand the privacy and data partition issues, we do need to think about how we can leverage these data sets to rapidly test hypotheses, to understand the quantum of a problem, and to collaborate with non-traditional research partners. As a young PhD student, I hated our monthly departmental research meetings. I reported regularly to an animal ethics committee, I reported regularly to human ethics committees, and I saw these meetings as a waste of valuable time that I would otherwise be spending in the lab. Until one day, when the light bulbs went on, and I realised that someone from another discipline had the solution to one of the challenges I was trying to overcome. And then I became a convert. Because just as in the boardroom, diversity opens up new and innovative ways of thinking, so too in research, it's often one of our stranger alliances that shows us the way forward. And so I hope that at this meeting, where we're privileged to have some of the brightest international minds with us this week, you will be able to share, to build research collaborations, and to work together not just to problem solve, but also to share the joys and collective strength that comes from being part of a service community. Because at the end of the day, we all serve that same community. The Argentinian writer José Naroski wrote that in war there are no unwounded soldiers, and indeed it leaves its mark on us all. In war, we see humanity at its worst, but sometimes we also see it at its best. And as humans, though, we will all come back changed in one way or another by the experience that we have seen and the things that we have done. For some of us, that is an empowering experience, one that challenges us, stretches us, and helps us to grow in directions we otherwise could not have imagined. But for others, it harms them in many ways, and it harms those that love and care for them. If we, as a nation, put our men and women into harm's way, we have an obligation to understand those risks, to quantitate those risks, to mitigate those risks, and to care for those that we have harmed, and do so with courage, compassion, and evidence. And so I thank each of you for the work that you are doing to address the emerging concerns of a contemporary generation that is navigating new risks and new challenges within a rapidly changing context. And I thank you on behalf of my daughter's generation for exploring the challenges for them in understanding the service of their parents. I applaud the organisers and the sponsors of this important meeting initiative, and I look forward to participating in some of the sessions over the next couple of days. Thank you.